Welcome to Snail Trail 4x4. Today I'm going to show you how to install front and rear brakes on your 5th gen 4Runner. Welcome to Snail Trail 4x4. I'm Jimmy Jet, and today we're going to be installing pads and rotors from Powerstop brakes on the front and rear of the 5th gen 4Runner. A little disclaimer: if you don't feel comfortable installing brakes, I would highly suggest not doing it. But it is actually a really simple and easy thing to do. So follow along and I'll show you how. Step one is we're going to lift the vehicle up with the brand new jack. Put it on some jack stands so we can take the tires off. First thing we did was we detached this little bracket just to give us a little bit more freedom and movement of the brake lines when it breaks free. Then what we do is we detach the two 17mm bolts that were on the back side of the brake caliper. The two 17mm bolts will release the caliper from the spindle. On the top side I needed to use a little bit of an extension just to get past the brake line. After removing those two bolts, the caliper swings free, and we ended up using a jack just to hold it still so it didn't move around. The reason I broke that bracket loose up at the top was just to give us this freedom so we weren't bending that hard line.
There we go. So we're going to use a clamp. We're going to put the big end over the old brake pads and then just put the squeezing side on the outside here so then we can turn it. What this is going to allow us to do is we are now going to be able to we're compressing the cylinders back in. That's going to push the fluid all back in and into the system. You're not going to lose any fluid this way. You probably wouldn't lose any fluid any other way either, but this way you can squeeze those back in by using the old pad. You're not really going to be damaging the old pad because we're going to take it out. So we just squeeze that caliper all the way shut.
So to remove the brake pads, what we're going to do is pull this sort of a cotter pin, safety pin out. Now we can push back on the pins. So here's this one out. You can start pulling this one out. And now this spring, it clicks through on each side here and here. So we can just squeeze it together. That comes out. And then out come the pads. The pads can go out through the top or the bottom. They just happen to fall out the bottom on this one. So the way this spring works is it has these two little tabs that pop out. And those are going to go in these holes here and here. And then these bumps or fingers out actually sit on the top side of these, so it'll be sprung, like stuck into here with that finger on top, and these loops go through the pin. Excuse me, the pin goes through the loops. So I like to put the pin in, make sure it's sticking up and you're through it. Push the pin all the way through. There we go. Now we will push this down and into the hole that it lives. Powerstop brakes supplied us with, instead of one pin, they supplied us with two cotter pins. So we're going to install that. There we go. New brake pads are installed. So I did a few taps with the rubber mallet right on the back side of this rotor, and that broke it totally free. So now we can take these off completely. All they are is just pressed in there, held in with the lug nut and the wheel typically, but they do seem to snag and get caught occasionally into that space. So now those are off, we can add the new ones on. So I put gloves on just because I want to keep these rotors as clean as possible. I don't want any dirt or grime or grease from my hands. Even, finger oil is on the side of this rotor. So I put some gloves on just to protect that. Torque spec, really tight. Really tight. The first step for us is we're going to take this section off by removing these two bolts. That's going to free this up so then we can redo the brake pads, which we'll probably do in a later step. Once I remove this section, I'm going to do this bolt and this bolt, then that whole caliper can come off.
Here's our brake pads that we can pull right out. They just slide out. Small. There we go. Pads. Pad 1. Pad 2. These things just pull off. Now I'm going to undo this bolt and this bolt up here, which are also 17s, and then we should be able to remove the rotor. There's that. Now I'm just going to give it a little persuasion right here with the rubber mallet. Hopefully this will pop off. We're not going to be reusing these, so if the rubber mallet doesn't work, we'll give it some more persuasion. So I was having a tough time getting this off, and I used the 2 screw holes to break it loose, but it still was stuck on there. And it was funny because we realized that the e-brake is on, and because the e-brake was on, we weren't able to pull these rotors off. So when we released the e-brake, we were able to break it all loose, and it's actually a really cool system with the drum brake pads on the inside that press on the inside of the rotor. And so we weren't able to get it off because these were pressed out onto this rotor, so it wasn't allowing us to yank it off. And as soon as we released the e-brake, these relaxed and it came right off. So if you're having trouble getting your rotors off, make sure your e-brake's off as well. So now what we're doing is we're just putting everything back in the order or reverse order. We just put these on, then we'll put the bracket over the top, and then we'll put the brake pads in and keep going from there. The way I got this one in here was I just gently used a screwdriver Phillips head so it wasn't too pointed, and pushed it and worked it through all the way. So now I got all new rubber parts, even put the new cap in on this side. So now I'm just going to lay this over the rotor and tighten everything up. So I'm going to use one of the old brake pads. I'm just going to set it over the top here, nice and easy. And then I'm going to use this clamp. Just going to set it on the brake pad so it makes an even force down, just like I did on the front. And then just tighten the clamp up, and that's going to squeeze the caliper closed. So these little clips, there's one for each direction. What you want the tabs facing out. There's one that's for you just really want the tabs facing out. So the tabs facing out this way, but if you turned it this way, then the tabs would be facing in. So that's why there's 2 sides. So just make sure that the tabs are always facing out. Got it. Never mind. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the caliper part over the top, put the bolts in, and tighten it up. So we tighten these down to 30 foot-pounds. Not very much. They're just holding itself in place and making sure that it doesn't come out. Thanks for watching this episode of Snail Trail 4x4, where we installed the Extreme Powerstop brake kit on all 4 corners of the 5th Gen 4Runner. Powerstop suggests you to do 5 stops going from 40 miles an hour down to 10, and 5 stops going from 35 miles an hour down to 5, and then drive for 5 minutes trying not to brake to let those brakes cool down and get calibrated and situate themselves up. Once you do that, you're good to go, and you can continue to drive and be normal and hammer down on those brakes just like you do on the subscribe button. Please make a comment below letting me know if I missed anything or what those torque specs were down there on that rear brake that we have no idea really what it was. We did a little bit of searching and found out about 30 foot-pounds, so that's where we're at. And don't forget, keep crawling.